Hello, my name is Peter Parfitt and welcome to the New Brick Workshop. Now, I've been asked a number of times about ways of cutting thin stock on a Tracksaw cutting station. Now, not everybody has the luxury of having a table saw where it's relatively easy to cut thin bits of wood. However, if you've got a Tracksaw cutting station made with a path guide system, of course, then I'm going to now show you the easy way to go about it. And I have to give credit to my YouTube subscriber, Miguel, who's a luthier in Paris, and he runs a very high-end outfit called the Lute Door. And I've just got a few pictures of his work here. Anyway, he came to me and he said, look, I bought your path guide system, I've got a Tracksaw cutting station, in fact I think it's the ultimate Tracksaw cutting station, but how do I cut very thin strips of wood? I haven't got a table saw. So here we go. Now we're trying to cut pieces of wood as thin as this from stock which is also fairly narrow. So you can see that we've got a bit of an issue. Now what I've done here is I've turned my festal track upside down. It would normally be this way, the saw would run along here, and this is the edge that the saw blade would be roughly against. And it's all very well if you're cutting something which is fairly wide like this, and you can take bits off, move it, and so on. But when your stock gets thinner, and let's say for sake of argument it's as thin as this, then you've got no grip at all because the track relies on this rubber bit of grip here to keep the wood still relative to the track itself. Without that, then what can happen is the piece of wood can move relative to the track. Now I'll be cutting pieces which end up being this thick. This is about 4.5 millimeters thick, and I'll be showing you how to do it from a relatively wide piece of stock, which is still too narrow for the track, and then I'll show you the extreme case of doing it with this piece of stock. Now of course what would be ideal is if these pieces of wood were much wider, but we can make them wider, theoretically wider, by gluing them onto a piece of anything which is about the same thickness. And by being about the same thickness, I mean within 0.5 millimeter. Now, it's a good idea if you get the edges lined up here. And I think immediately you can see that when this is underneath the track is going to be able to get grip across here with absolutely no problem at all. If this is a glue line or double-sided sticky tape or whatever it might be, then that will work perfectly. And it will also work for the case where this piece of wood is very thin. Now, the piece of stock that goes here doesn't need to be anything very special. It's only the thickness. And it could be several pieces. You could make up a little frame out of several pieces of wood, and as long as eventually when you stick this onto the side you've got a straight edge there, then you've got no problem at all. And for my demo today I'm going to set up both this piece there, so there's my straight edge, and this piece here, and this will be my straight edge, and we're going to do both lots of cuts. I'm going to demo it here, and I'm going to then demo it here. And I think you can see already this is a very simple technique. And you can see that from these burn marks here, I'd used an old blade in a table saw to do the previous cuts, and this will be a lot better. This piece of wood that I'm using is actually a piece of walnut veneered MDF, and it's not cheap, but I'm not going to waste any of it. The very worst, I'll waste a thin saw cut here and a thin saw cut there, that's all. Anyway, so that one's going to be glued on there, and this one's going to be glued on here, like so. As I said earlier, you could use some instantaneous glue. There are some of these two-part glues that you just put a little bit on one piece and then spray it, and it makes an instant bond. I don't need to worry about that because I've got all the time in the world. And incidentally, if you've not seen me use these Bessie uni clamps before, I must tell you they are absolutely my go-to clamps. I've got this long one here and a number of these shorter ones, and they're absolutely brilliant. And I'm just going to leave that glue to dry for about an hour, and then I'll be ready to start doing the cuts. So I had a quick cup of coffee, and so glue will be enough now for us to continue. And there we have our pieces all set up. Do make sure that this is a straight line, and you can do that by putting it against your fence or whatever, or just give it a skim with a plane. And the same with this other edge here. So I've now trimmed this so that that's a nice straight line and that's a nice straight line, and I can now start doing my repeat cuts. Now the next issue is, how do we set a stop so that we can do repeat cuts? And it's unlikely that most stops will be able to go all the way up here. So what I'm going to do is use a method, I call it indexing, but I don't know what it should be called. And basically I've got a piece of wood, I haven't measured it, and I'm going to push that up against my piece of stock. And I know that this piece of wood now, as a result, is 176 millimeters long, because I can measure it on the scale. I know my kerf line is 2.5 millimeters, so I want to create pieces of wood which are 4.5. So 2.5 and 4.5 is 7. So I take my 176 and add 7, which makes 183, and set my stop like so. That means now that if I have this piece of wood here, I can now push my stock up against there, and I should then create a cut which is 4.5 millimeters thick, or close to. Now the behaviour of this piece of wood we're cutting off may be influenced by this block being there, touching it at that end. So I now remove that. This piece of wood is still in the same position, and I can now do my cut. So there's my cut, beautiful cut, and I'll just measure it for thickness, and that is close to my 4.5 millimeter. I could, if necessary, I could make an adjustment to get it just right. That's the first one done. Put that block back there, move that over so it's touching the block. That's perfectly okay. Remove the block, do the next cut. And there we have another perfect piece. And I could keep doing this all day. And when it comes to the really, really thin bit, once we get close to the very end, it's the same process. That's there. Take the block away and do the next cut. Well, there are all my thin strips cut to size absolutely perfectly, and I hope this video has helped. Anyway, that's it. Many thanks for watching. Incidentally, Miguel, I did have dinner once with the world's most famous lute player, Julian Bream. He was lovely, and so this is just for you. I know, I'll go back to my day job. Many thanks. Bye-bye.